You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Do we ever have some interesting guests this week? Linda Sarsour will talk about what Arab Americans are doing to change bigoted attitudes and practices toward them. Then Annie Leonard will give us the truth about stuff, where our stuff comes from and where it goes when we're done with it. Eye-opening, believe me. And your eyes will widen even more when Maia Szalavitz exposes how most current rehab programs do not help addicted women. Last, Nina Khrushcheva takes us into Putin's mind and the attitudes behind Russia's policies today. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. Back in the headlines this week is Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, trying still to do damage control over the George Washington Bridge traffic scandal in Fort Lee. He commissioned a report, an investigative report. There'll be many investigations going on, state and federal, but he commissioned his own with taxpayer money, which has just now been released. The lawyers found that he was found not culpable at all. Surprise! But they did, in fact, double down on portraying his former Deputy Chief of Staff, Bridget Ann Kelly, as the evil center, wicked witch of the West. They described her as duplicitous, as weeping frequently, as dependent on men for approval and stability. These lawyers, by the way, did not interview her, but that didn't stop them from describing her in unusually personal terms, including that she had had a brief relationship which had cooled at the behest of the man, Mr. Christie's campaign manager, Bill Stepien. The report raises these details, but doesn't stop to explain what they have to do with her sending that damning email, because she was, unfortunately, the one who sent the email saying it's time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee. It simply concludes, the report that is, that these events in her personal life may have had some bearing on her motivations and state of mind. How dare they? The portrayal conflicts with portrayals offered by others, not just her friends who are furious over this, but legislators who worked with her, who describe her as being devoted to her job and with great attention to detail. And, she had survived the challenges of a divorce. She had had family health problems, and she's a 42-year-old single mom. Kelly's friends also said that they had been struck by gender bias in the report, noting that the personal language was not used to describe the man who's accused of being her co-conspirator, David Wildstein. And the report goes on to consolidate blame on her as the scapegoat, and inaccurately. For example, it asserts that she canceled meetings with Mayor Fulop of Jersey City, who had declined to endorse Christie's re-election. In fact, independent documents established that those meetings were canceled not by Kelly, but by the officials who'd been scheduled to meet with the mayor. Now, the story is not inside the headlines. The story is the headlines. The fact that the story is the headlines, and it's called sexism, that's our story. That's what we've won. The New York Times and other major news outlets have used the word sexism about this report and the way it treats former Christie aide, Bridget Ann Kelly. So that's a win. I'm sorry for her. But inch by inch, my friends, inch by inch. And now for our first guest. Linda Sarsour is the National Advocacy Director for the National Network for Arab American Communities, and locally she serves as the Director of the Arab American Association of New York. She has been awarded the Champion of Change Prize by the White House and honored for her stereotype smashing. Welcome, Linda. Marhaba. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. You are a Palestinian Muslim American and a self-proclaimed, quote, pure New Yorker born and raised in Brooklyn. I love it. And you are currently the National Advocacy Director for the National Network for Arab American Communities. So you're locally serving as the director of the Arab American Association of New York. You're one hell of a busy woman. And I would imagine that part of your portfolio is daily, continual trying to dismantle the extraordinary, vicious stereotypes about Arabs in general, Arab Americans, and about women in particular.
That's what I do for a living.
My God, and you're still walking upright.
Yeah, a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. What do you find is most effective in trying to bash such stereotypes, of the women especially?
I think what I found most effective is using my own personal story and also using the different kind of roles that I play in the society, which is being a mother, being, a member of a community, working in the nonprofit world, being an activist on a multitude of social justice issues, not only those that are perceived Arab and or Muslim issues. Mm-hmm. I use things like music and kind of my own life experiences being born and raised and working in Brooklyn, and I think that really connects me to a lot of people. So that one-on-one individual, being able to talk to people on an individual level has been the most effective for me. Mm-hmm.
I know that you're listed on SheSource as an expert in many areas. I mean, immigration, women's rights, just the Middle East region. And you're also an alumna of Progressive Women's Voices from the Women's Media Center, aren't you?
Yes, I am. It was probably one of the best programs I've ever done in my entire life, and it allowed me to really feel confident about what I know. Progressive Women's Media Voices program allowed me to meet other wonderful women, some of them much more experienced in the media than I was, and being able to stay connected with them and learn from them has been a really great experience for me.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. It really is. I mean, 7 or 8 years ago, the whole Women's Media Center was just a little glimmer in the eyes of the three crazy women of us who founded it, and to see the way that it's grown under the direction of Julie Burton, the president, and to hear people like yourself, so admirable, the work that you do, saying that programs have been of real concrete aid to you, just really makes my heart sing. Thank you so much. It's really...
No, I mean, thank Women's Media Center and those who support them. I mean, for someone like me, as you know, we don't really get those platforms, and right. I've been very fortunate to get platforms on CNN, MSNBC, and be able to talk to a national audience on the issues that I believe are important to my community, and also to have someone who looks like me in those on those platforms. Unfortunately, there are not many, very few, maybe even a handful of American Muslim women who get to have those types of platforms. And not only do I get the platforms, but I've gotten the training to ensure that I'm able to project a message, or at least the message that I want to project, in a way that's meaningful for people, and that's what I learned from the Women's Media Center.
Oh, that's just wonderful, really wonderful to hear. Have we made much progress, any progress? How would you rate the progress in terms of stereotype bashing for the Muslim community or the Arab community specifically?
I think it's relative depending on where you are in the country and who you're speaking to, but I think on the national level, I think we've made a lot of strides. And again, seeing more members of the American Muslim community on these national platforms, it's an issue that's really still pretty alive. Stereotyping, bullying in the school system, harassment by individuals, and also, unfortunately, some institutions and some of the right. But I think the Muslim community has risen to the challenge and just doing a lot of coalition building, which I think has been one of the most effective tools that the American Muslim community has used. It's really building relationship across faith, across sectors, ethnicities, regionally. I think that's been really where where the future is in building human relations with other communities, and also those who have experienced what we've experienced, whether it's the Jewish community, Irish community, Latino community, African American community, the Japanese community. It's been a really overwhelming love and support that we've received from many communities who said, look, we were there at one point. don't you worry, it gets a little better. And then having their support has been really helpful.
Well, that's refreshing to hear, because one of the things that, despairs me is when we don't learn, when people don't. We're in a remarkably adaptive species. If it's probably the greatest strength of being human, but we're awfully slow when we adapt, and it, there's nothing more despairing than to see bigotry coming from a community which has just yesterday in the historical time been in exactly the same position, and yet now that it's accepted, or now that it's, I don't want to say assimilated because that has all kinds of bad connotations, but now that it is respected and regarded in large part, maybe not totally, as a part of the most important deep organic thread of the country, it turns around and snarls at somebody newer. So it's very heartening to hear you say that there's been that kind of reception in some quarters.
Absolutely. And actually, we're launching a national anti-bias campaign called Take on Hate, It's Still Happening and It's Still Wrong. And it speaks to exactly what you just said. And this campaign includes, paid media, earned media, educational campaign that will tour the country, as well as some policy asks that we have around issues particularly affecting the American Muslim and Arab community. And we also see it as an opportunity to, again, build relationships with other communities who would then join our campaign to say, let's take on hate together, because it's still happening and it's still wrong. So we're very excited about also the support we're getting for our national anti-bias campaign, and look forward to sharing the beautiful, ads and parts of the campaign with our fellow Americans and our partners. Education
is so central to this, I find, because in the work that I did some years ago with Palestinian women, and then left my heart in Gaza, in the camps in Gaza. And so in trying to continue that work, I find that the ignorance in this country is just so profound. I mean, you must get tired of that sometimes.
Yeah, yes and no. I think that for me, and I always tell people, when I have the platforms, and I say, look, no question is a stupid question. And I think lots of times people have these really, or what they believe are really ignorant questions, but I think it's better for you to ask these what you perceive are ignorant questions than for you to kind of drown in the ignorance, and then unfortunately sometimes ignorance translates into bigotry and into
so you make it safe for them to ask the questions, which
absolutely. And I think for me, I'm a woman that's covered. People always want to say, but why do you cover your hair? Or even questions as simple as do I even have hair under my hijab? And I always chuckle at that, and I say that's a really good question. And people say, really? And I'm like, well, because sometimes, for example, in the Orthodox Jewish community, we know, for example, that many women shave their heads and wear wigs, so that sometimes people perceive that we're doing the same, except that we cover our heads with hijabs. So I tell people, don't ever believe that your question is a stupid question. Ask the question, especially if you have the person who's accessible and available to answer. The responsibility is on members of the American Muslim community to be available and to be open and not feel offended when people are asking you questions. So it's great.
That's wonderful. You're a generous-hearted and very smart organizer. And I thank you for being with us, and I thank you for the work that you do. And again, I'm so glad that Progressive Women's Voices was a tool for you to use. Clearly, it's a tool that sings in your hands.
Absolutely.
And again, shukran and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Shukran to you too. Thank you so much.
We have to take a short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. When we return, we'll learn how and why certain treatments for addiction are destructive, especially to women, and which treatments are good, and how to tell the difference.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Maia Szalavitz is a journalist and author specializing in mental health coverage with a particular focus on addiction and drug policy. She writes for Time Magazine's website. She has a book out called Help at Any Cost, and she's currently working on a new book on neuroscience. Her personal experience as a former cocaine and heroin addict, combined with her extensive knowledge of the scientific literature, makes her a very interesting voice. Welcome to the program, Maia.
Thank you so much for having me.
How did you get into this, and talk a little about the work that you do?
Sure. Well, I got into it via the unfortunate route of personal experience. In my 20s, I was a cocaine and heroin addict, and I was injecting, and that was in the 80s, and I was at incredibly high risk of HIV.
Wow.
And the incredible thing was that there was this activist who was visiting from San Francisco who happened to teach me to use clean needles. And if that hadn't happened, I would not be here today. So I immediately, actually, even before I got into recovery, I went around like doing things like trying to post signs at the methadone clinic I was in saying, use clean needles, bleach them. I did graffiti on this. I did whatever little things I could do at that point.
Sure.
And then when I realized that I needed help, and I just want to say, for me, methadone did not work because I was shooting a lot of coke on top of it, which is not a very good idea. But for many people, it is a highly effective treatment. And so when I say I was on methadone and using on top, that was not to disparage methadone.
Wow, what a background of coming to the issue.
Yes, it gave me a real education because basically I learned one set of myths about addiction, on the street. Mm-hmm. I learned another set in treatment. You get another set that's full of, sort of government propaganda. Mm-hmm. And there's many other versions. And until I started studying the science, including the sociology and the biomedical parts, that was the only time I really began to understand it accurately.
What kind of drug policy should we have, Maia?
The policy that we needs to be much more compassionate and needs to use the criminal justice system a lot less. Mm-hmm. I think possession of all drugs should be decriminalized. If you believe addiction is a disease or any kind of a disorder, arresting people for it is a stupid idea, just as arresting people for depression or for being overweight is a stupid idea.
Yep.
So I think, that for all drugs, I think marijuana should be 100% legalized. It is less harmful than alcohol and tobacco, and it makes no sense. The only reason it is illegal is basically racism. If you look at the debate that occurred when marijuana was made illegal, the guy behind it, Harry Anslinger, said these incredible statements like, well, the reason we need prohibition is to keep the degenerate races down, and marijuana needs to be prohibited because it makes the, quote, darkies as good as think they're as good as the white man.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
This is language.
Yeah.
This is the language of drug prohibition. And,
well, we also know that if it's a white boy, if it's pale male, or for that matter, pale female, with snorting coke, it's one kind of sentence,
exactly.
And if it's crack cocaine, in the black community, you're in for life or 30 years. So
exactly. And the very first cocaine laws, there was this incredible headline from the New York Times around that time saying, "New Southern menace, Negro cocaine fiends."
Oh my God!
And it claimed that the drug made them impervious to bullets.
Oh, terrific! I bet. Gee.
Yeah. These Southern sheriffs needed to get higher caliber weaponry to deal with these cocaine. It's just, but when you look at that and you realize, they're trying to pretend this is science now.
Yeah.
They're trying to pretend that the reason alcohol and tobacco are legal and the reason these other drugs are illegal isn't racist. They're trying to pretend that there is some kind of scientific or reasonable reason for this being illegal and that being not. And there isn't one.
Well, it seems that that's changing anyway because the public opinion, at least on marijuana, has been brought to bear, and we now see, changing laws in a number of states and counties. But say a little about how the impact of this differs in terms of women.
Well, there's a number of ways. For one, treatment until very recently was completely designed with men in mind.
What do you know?
Well, and this method that they use actually isn't even good for men, but it's even worse for women, because basically what a lot of treatment, bizarrely enough, was based on this cult from the 50s called Synanon. And their idea was to take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and invert them such that it became, we do all of this by force. So the first step is, you're powerless, we're going to make you powerless. The steps involving confession, we're going to force the confession. We're going to attack, humiliate, confront, break you down, because we need to break you down to rebuild you. And really, until the mid-90s, this was absolutely the dominant form of treatment in America. And the 12-step stuff still remains in 90% of American treatment, but the confrontational stuff has been dialed back a bit. And lo and behold, so many women who are addicted are survivors of sexual abuse.
Yes.
You can imagine what that kind of a treatment is like for them, especially since public humiliation, particularly sexual humiliation, is a big part of the thing.
Of course. I mean, the treatment is a trigger itself.
Yeah, exactly. And they're really into, you're a slut, you're a whore, like all this kind of stuff, and making people dress up. I mean, I actually exposed in 2007 or 2008, somewhere around in there, a school in Washington that was making girls do lap dances.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff exists on a wide scale. It's this sort of 70s hangover stuff.
Now, let me get clear on this. This is Synanon. This is not 12-step necessarily.
Right, exactly. This is Synanon, and the influence was most felt in programs called therapeutic communities. So that would be like Phoenix House, Daytop. Now, I have to say, Phoenix House has completely renounced this stuff. Daytop, I don't know about. They recently faced bankruptcy, but as far as I know, they haven't really renounced it. But I don't really know. But like every single program that was this 18-month, model that was mostly used in public treatment, they all were based explicitly on Synanon, or they were founded by former members of Synanon or people who've been trained by former members of Synanon.
I see.
It was a national scandal that never really got much attention. But no, the 12-step programs like, say, Hazelden or Betty Ford, they went through a flirtation with the confrontational and humiliating stuff in maybe the 80s. And then they began to drop it, but there's still, throughout addiction treatment, what you would call good bedside manner, like treating people with dignity and respect and kindness, was seen as harmful until very, very recently. And the idea that like you would respect patient autonomy was antithetical to addiction treatment, because these are idiots who don't know what they're doing. They have no control. They're powerless. We better control them.
Instead, really, wouldn't you want them to develop their own power? I mean, it seems antithetical.
Well, exactly. And I mean, for women, the idea of powerlessness is particularly dangerous. Because
yes, it's a life sentence.
Yeah, and basically, particularly women and other oppressed groups, you end up with this, real conflict with the 12-step stuff, because it's saying, accept the higher power, surrender to God, right. Only this way will you get better.
Yeah.
And, that is not very helpful for many women. There are some people who are helped. I think, it's clear that the one thing that is absolutely true about 12-step programs is they are available 24/7 for free around the world, and you can get social support. There is a 12-step saying, take what you like and leave the rest. And that, I think, is, again, that's all cool, and those programs should be encouraged to do their voluntary self-help thing for each other.
Right.
The problem I have with 12-step programs is when treatment itself becomes indoctrination into the 12 steps. And in about 90% of rehabs, you have all these groups and meetings and stuff where it's basically the whole idea is to teach you that the main thing you got to get out of this rehab is you're going to go to meetings afterwards.
I see.
And that's going to be what's going to, power your recovery. And so for people for whom meetings aren't amenable, it's completely useless. Plus, the 12 traditions say that you're not supposed to get paid for doing 12-step work, in other words, teaching other addicts and alcoholics about the steps.
Right.
But all of these programs are doing that. So basically, you're getting charged, $20,000, $60,000 a month at some of these high-end places for getting what you could get at a church basement for free.
I see. What you do think are good treatment approaches?
Sure. I mean, the basic bottom line for all treatment, for all psychotherapy, is empathy and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And treatments that allow the patient, so-called meet the patient where they're at, allow them to be empowered, and that use approaches something called motivational interviewing. There's another approach called cognitive behavioral therapy. There's an approach called community reinforcement. There's all kinds of approaches that are basically cognitive and behavioral, and that work with what the person wants help with in a way that is not traumatizing, in a way that is sensitive to people who may have been traumatized. And also, it's really critical, at least 50% of people with addictions have a coexisting mental illness. If you don't deal with that, treating the addiction is probably not going to work.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. Tell me, do you have a website? Is there a place where people can go and learn more about this, or about the specific treatment courses that you've suggested?
I do. This is related to my book, Help at Any Cost, which exposed the Synanon connection to the troubled teen program.
Yes.
So it's just helpatanycost.com.
Helpatanycost.com. Okay.
Yes, and that actually has, for parents who are looking for help for their kids, it has some questions to ask so that they don't get into a bad place.
Okay. All right. Well, you're terrific, and this has been very informative and eye-opening, and I hope you come back and talk some more at some other point.
Thanks. I would love to.
It's time for another break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live. If you ever saw the kids program, Mr. Rogers, you might remember one of his songs, Think About Garbage. It was like, what about garbage? Where's it go? Where's it go to? Well, I can't sing, but you get the point. Our next guest knows where garbage goes to.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again. Annie Leonard has for 2 decades investigated where our stuff comes from and where it goes when we toss it. She worked for Greenpeace International and Gaia and Essential Action, and she traveled to more than 40 countries, poking into factories and trash dumps to create the film The Story of Stuff. That movie blossomed into the Story of Stuff project, which works to empower people around the globe to fight for a sustainable and just future. Here's Annie Leonard. Welcome to the program, Annie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I love your project. I just love and I love its name, The Story of Stuff, and what we do with our stuff and where it goes and when we toss it and the impact of that and having stuff and having too much stuff, the great George Carlin routine we were talking about. Tell our listeners how you came to create The Story of Stuff.
Sure. Well, first, let me just say for folks who don't know that The Story of Stuff is a 20-minute online film about where all our stuff comes from and where it goes. And people often ask me how long it took to make it. I say it took 20 years. I really did travel around the world for 20 years looking at the factories where our stuff is made and the dumps where our stuff is dumped. I mean, I snuck into factories in Haiti and South Africa and Pakistan and China. And when I came back to the United States, I was so frustrated at how much all of our stuff in our lives, the real impact is hidden from us. You know, we only know the stuff in our lives, or we only have a relationship with it from the store to our house to the garbage can or the recycling bin.
Right.
But before it comes to us and afterwards, there's a lot going on. So I started experimenting with ways to talk about this that wouldn't be too wonky and that wouldn't be a drag. You know, a lot of environmental information is so whiny and wonky. No one wants to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stumbled on this talk that became so popular that I couldn't keep up with requests, so I made a 20-minute film of the talk. I put it online in December 2007. My hope was to get 50,000 people to watch it in 10 years. And everyone told me that was really outlandish, that people don't watch 20-minute things online. I said, well, let's just try. We got 50,000 views in one day.
Oh, my God.
I was shocked. It's now over 30 million views from every country on the planet, been translated into dozens of languages. It's really helped spark a super important conversation about where all our stuff comes from and where it goes.
It's a wonderful, wonderful film, video treasure.
Actually, when I made the film, I had a day job, and I was sort of doing this as a side project. I was shocked at the response it got. In the first year alone, I got 250,000 emails from people who saw the film, and it resonated with them. I feel like in many ways it touched a growing sense of unease that the public has. Like, we know there's something wrong, and we don't see that reflected in the mainstream media. But whether we're concerned about lead contamination in the toys we just bought our nephews, or we don't let our children play outside because we don't know the neighbors anymore, just all these different ways that people sense something is wrong. And they weren't seeing that reality reflected. So this film just really touched people. It validated something that we knew in our hearts. We're flooded by requests to get involved and for more films. So that was about 6 years ago. We've gone on now to make a total of 9 films that are all short, online, really fun, cute cartoons that look at issues as complicated as the bad prioritization of government subsidies, to the undue influence of corporations in our democracy, to the prevalence of toxic chemicals in personal care products. We have 9 films that look at all kinds of issues in a fun, engaging way. And we are now beginning campaigns and doing things with this huge community that has grown up around these films.
And it's global, too, because what fascinates me and is heartbreaking is that so much of our stuff originates in the global south, in factories, in maquiladoras, usually with women earning $1 a day, and then comes to us in the global north. And then when we're done with it, goes back because it's cheaper to ship it halfway around the world, our garbage, than to treat it properly here. And Ms. Magazine recently ran a fantastic story, which I turned them on to and helped edit, about the waste pickers of India. So
I have to see that.
Yeah, everybody knows about the garbage men. I mean, the garbage men come and pick up the trash and take it to the dumps. But then the women come in, and they're called waste pickers, and they sift through it, living on these fetid, stinking garbage heaps, to find the bit of plastic, a bit of wood, anything that can be recycled, anything that can be sold for recycling. So they are both doing an environmental job and a service to the community, and yet they're held in the lowest esteem. And it's women. So I offer that, not that you don't already know it.
Well, actually, I think it's important to remind people, because I talk to a lot of folks from the U.S. who come back from India or South America or someplace and say, those countries don't have any recycling. Actually, they do. They have this informal recycling that is often vastly more effective than our recycling. So our challenge then is to have solidarity with these waste pickers and figure out a way that they can do their recycling but make it safe and dignified.
Exactly. To be honored for the fact that they are planet savers.
That's right. Well, there is actually a growing movement of them around the world where they're actually beginning to connect. People in Brazil and India, these waste pickers in the Philippines are starting to connect, and they're advocating that when their governments, quote, modernize and develop their waste programs, rather than bringing in these big, expensive, foreign, high-tech companies that'll just burn up all the waste and not give any jobs, build a really just and sustainable waste management system on the foundation that these rag pickers, or waste pickers they're called, have created, because they know more about recycling than anyone I have ever met in 25 years of doing this work.
Of course they do. And their livelihoods depend on it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they've done it generationally. Mother teaches daughter, teaches granddaughter. It's an incredible chain of skill. And if it's regarded as skill, which it should be.
Well, one of the threats to them is our waste. in a lot of countries in Asia, that, as you said, there are generations of families that go around and either go in the dump or go around the streets and collect these plastics, and they can tell if it's PET or PVC or HDPE, what kind of plastic it is just by touching it, and they throw it in their bags and they collect the stuff all day. And now what's happening in a lot of countries, because we are collecting so much plastic in our recycling programs, and the bulk of the plastic collected in recycling programs in the U.S. is not actually recycled here, we ship it to Asia. And so it is putting these local recyclers out of work because the quantity of waste coming in from us is so huge that the middlemen are buying plastic from us instead of from these street pickers.
Yeah, yeah. And anybody who has lived abroad knows that I would come back from a month or whatever is in New Zealand, and where you still bring your bag to the supermarket or the grocery store, your own bag, and your produce is wrapped in newspaper, and you bring it home. And then I would come back and be struck all over again at the packaging in the global north, which is layers within layers within layers of unnecessary, death-dealing, chemical-saturated stuff.
Absolutely. You mentioned how our products are so often made on the other side of the planet, shipped here, and then we use them and then ship it back as waste. When it comes to packaging, we're using it for 5 minutes. I mean, it is just nonsensical to be treating materials this way. But, we asked our 500,000 member strong Story of Stuff community, what did they want to work on together? And one of the top issues they mentioned was plastics and packaging. So we are running a bunch of campaigns on that and supporting people who want to get plastic bag bans in their community. So if any of your listeners are interested in fighting the ridiculous amount of plastic and packaging in this country, please get in touch, because we have lots of good resources and training. And the plastic bag issue is one area where we're seeing a lot of progress. Almost every day, another municipality somewhere in the country bans plastic bags.
Well, where do people reach you so they can add their own efforts into the thousands of people you're working with and come away with more information?
Well, that would be wonderful. They can go to storyofstuff.org, just like it sounds, the 3 words, storyofstuff.org, and you can watch all 9 of our films there. We also have teaching guides for school teachers, for faith-based communities. We have a whole bunch of other resources and training programs. So just play around on the website, lots of good stuff, and be sure to hit the button that says join our community so that we can stay in touch with you.
Oh, Annie, this is great. Thanks so much for what you're doing, and thanks for being with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
It's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still Robin Morgan. But when we come back, we'll explore the attitudes inside the minds of Russia's rulers and power elite by someone who should know, because her family has been part of them.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. Nina L. Khrushcheva is Professor of International Affairs at New School University in New York, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and she's written for Newsweek, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and lots of other publications. Her books include Imagining Nabokov, Russia Between Art and Politics, and her new book, just out, is called The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind. Welcome, Nina Khrushcheva, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you.
My few words in Russian are «Добро прожаловать в всемирный феминизм».
Спасибо большое.
They weren't totally impenetrable. It's welcome to global feminism, I think. Yes?
Yes, it is, and thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. You're coming out with what sounds like a fascinating new book, The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind. And I want to get to that later in our discussion. But I want to start by tapping into your excellent brain as a Russia specialist and an international affairs specialist. on what is happening there. And I want to start by asking a really naive question. But if it's on my mind, it must be on other people's mind as well. If the Crimea is traditionally a part of Russia until just a few decades ago, and if most Crimeans are ethnic Russians and seem to want to return there, however strangely manipulated the referendum might have been, and if this country, the United States, fought a civil war to keep secession from happening, isn't it a double standard for this country then to say that Crimea should not return to Russia? I'm just questioning that. I'm not a fan of Putin in the slightest with his ultra manliness, but it seems a confusing situation. The United States would not be happy to be ringed round by adversarial forces, and so in a sense, I'm sympathizing with Russia. But is that wrong?
No, actually, I think it's a very excellent point, and when you are asking it, it's a very legitimate question to ask. One of the problems with this approach for Russia, though, is that that's exactly how Putin is phrasing it, is that because the United States itself always, or so he sees, exercises double standards, so Russia can go in unilaterally and take parts of other countries that it think its own, and even if he does have mandate of the people in Crimea to make them part of Russia. This is an excellent sort of conversation to have. It nonetheless does not prevent international laws from functioning in the territory of Russia and territory of Ukraine. Right. And whatever Putin has done has been not entirely legal from the international standpoint. Mm-hmm. And one last point I want to make is that if somebody behaves like a jerk in civilized society, it doesn't give you the right to behave like one. So this is just sort of my response to Vladimir Putin.
Yes, well, no, absolutely. I mean, and also our right wing here, which is, of course, suddenly in love with Putin and his his ejaculatory politics of making instant decisions, which is like a real man, and is criticizing poor Obama, who has a lot on his plate. God forbid he should think twice about something before doing it. So the politics of sexism comes into play, along with that of imperial land grab. What would be a sane political response?
Well, I think sanctions has been a very, very good political response. If I were to criticize Barack Obama a little bit, although I'm a big fan, is that one Putin has been around for 15 years. So whoever advisors are there in the White House, they should know you do not promise Putin there will be consequences. Oh, you will regret that. If you decide to do something, you go in and do it right away, because that gives him a leeway, but also gives him an excuse to say, look at me, I'm a macho man, I'm acting because that's what men do, and look at all these others, they waffle, they promise and whatnot. So I think the sanctions, especially the United States sanctions that are very well targeted and goes for really top people in the Putin orbit, already, I think, delayed the kind of presented consequences for Russia, because its economy has been diving for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks since the situation started unfolding. But also, it does seem that Putin is taking an interesting pause, which is not entirely like him, because the Crimean situation has developed so quickly, and suddenly we are figuring out what would be next Putin's step, how he's going to go destabilize Ukraine further, but it doesn't seem that he actually is going to invade Ukraine further.
Even though the troops are massing on the border.
But they, as even Americans pointed out, the Pentagon pointed out, they have the right to be on the Russian side. I mean, yes, it is a very, once again, this very jerky, macho Putin's tactics. But he hasn't crossed that, because he seems to be finding better ways to destabilize Ukraine rather than actually really anger the world community. Not that he hasn't angered it enough, but angering it even further.
Right. Where is Medvedev in this? I liked him. I mean, was I crazy to do that? He seemed, he seemed more rational. He seemed younger. He seemed more future-looking.
No, sorry. I mean, we all liked him because he was I think Russia is so patriotic that even our First Lady is a man. He was serving while Putin was prime minister, fakely prime minister. Medvedev was instilled as president, but basically he had a ceremonial role that usually in normal countries the First Lady performs. He was having this civilizing influence, talking about modernization, here is cookies. We need to, diversify the economy and all these things. So no, we are just so patriarchal that even, as I said, our First Lady is a man.
Well, I fell for that one. Let us talk about your own history, which is so amazing, and your own books, and particularly the one that's coming out, because you are the great-granddaughter of Nikita Khrushchev, yes?
Yes, I am.
Yes, which of course younger women listening to this may not immediately identify, but women of my generation will remember. He was the head of the Soviet Union for many years and a major imprint on our consciousness. I remember him as a man of great drama, and thinking to myself, and I was very young at the time, but thinking to myself when he pounded his shoe at the United Nations, I remember thinking, well, that's kind of actually a nice display of human anger. And everybody said, that is not, shut up, that's not diplomatic. But I remember thinking that it was human. And there's a human picture that comes out in this of your grandfather as well as of your... So tell a little bit about the book and that story.
Can I just please first talk about the shoe? Actually, he never pounded the shoe. There was a shoe on display, but the story was highly exaggerated because it was a useful Cold War propaganda for the Americans too. Is that to show exactly what you were told when you were a child, saying, well, look at our enemy. He's so uncivilized. We need more of military-industrial complex.
Oh, I was a problem. Obviously, I was contrary. What they thought, I had the opposite reaction. I thought it was a
right. No, but it was really taken this way. And you're right. It was a very human. Khrushchev was. The interesting thing about Khrushchev, he was the first public politician that probably Russia ever had. And until I think Boris Yeltsin, Mikhail Gorbachev, maybe the other leaders that came after Khrushchev, he was a politician, which was not the formula at the time, because the Soviet Union only had Soviet functionaries.
Sure.
So, and the book that I wrote, The Gulag of the Russian Mind, is exactly on the subject of how in Russia, which is very traditional, because despite the Bolshevik Revolution that was supposed to bring egalitarian values to the Soviet Union and then the rest of the world, equality to genders and sexes and workers and everything, it was actually an interesting kind of contradiction, because it slapped together patriarchy, it slapped together egalitarian values, very unmodernized peasant society, and came out with this strange mutant of a country that on one hand was much ahead of the world, on the other hand was so behind of the world it's embarrassing. Yeah. And I'm looking at Khrushchev as a contradictory figure in all these aspects of Russian life, and also something that I'm very interested in, why Russia still loves Stalin, why Russia is so enamored with strong leaders and reformers like Khrushchev, and then Gorbachev, always sort of on the back burner and always guilty of all the problems that Russia ever had. I mean, Crimea now is blamed on Khrushchev squarely because he transferred it from Russia to Ukraine in 1954, and even when Putin announced the formal annexation of Crimea, he in fact squarely blamed Khrushchev and accused him of mass purges, which is, of course, a very funny way of looking at it, because Putin's hero Stalin was the orchestrator of the Great Purges.
Yeah, it's a little spooky when one thinks that Putin has Stalin as a hero.
It is, but it's actually every nation deserves its government, and Russia. A lot of Russians have Stalin as a hero, and some Russians, it not necessarily they would say it's Stalin, but somebody who instills order. And once you start unraveling that line about instilling order, you ultimately do come to Stalin, and even indirectly, he becomes a national hero.
Yes. Oh, this is fascinating work that you do. And it's called The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind. I hope that you will come back and talk to us more. Spasiba.
Thank you. Пожалуйста. Thank you so much.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. This week, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published its latest report. It's pretty dire. Climate change is already much further along and having more drastic effect than anticipated. In particular, the report concluded that the world's poorest people, no surprise here, will suffer the most as temperatures rise. And in particular, island nations will face eradication. They're just sinking. They're going underwater as the oceans rise. And the indifference continues, whether it's Democrats as well as Republicans in Congress, the same folks backing both of them, the oil interests and the big corporations, who seem not to get it, that their children and grandchildren also will lack water and will lack air to breathe. And it's spring. And I thought this weekend I would get out in the garden. And I will, now that the travel is mostly done, and the speeches during Women's History Month are mostly over. So I can get out there and get some dirt under my fingernails and tend these few feet of garden in the middle of the city that I love so much. The crocuses and the snowdrops are already pretty much finished, and there are buds already on the hydrangea and the azalea, and I can get to the farmer's market and pick up the herb seedlings and the annuals and then begin to put them in. And I thought how ironic and how absurd, really, what a gesture toward absurdity that I tend this garden. I'm privileged, I'm white, I don't live in one of the world's poorest countries. I'm not having to grow the garden for food, although I do grow some vegetables, just for the joy of it. I do this because I love this planet, and I love to get my hands in dirt. And although it's true one thinks globally and acts locally, it's also true you have to do both at the same time. So I'll be out there this weekend, filled with rage at those in power doing nothing, or too little, too slowly, to save this small blue planet, and resolved to do more myself, and in the meanwhile, doing humble acts of what I call earth-keeping. Just that, earth-keeping. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM, or you've been visiting us at WMClive.com for this and for a whole rich archive of all our previous episodes. Or you might have found us on iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast worldwide. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next week when we will celebrate National Poetry Month with Ursula K. Le Guin and several other fine poets, each talking about the mysteries and craft of this art, and each reading from her work. Check out WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter to find out just who these surprise guests will be. And remember, you can find them only here on Women's Media Center, live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.